Sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis. You wake up in the middle of the night, or maybe right as your alarm should be going off, and for a second everything is normal. Then you realize you can't move. Not a finger, not your jaw, nothing. Your eyes are open, you can see your room exactly as it is, but your body feels like it's been switched off. And in a lot of cases, you get the sense that someone, or something, is standing in the corner of the room, watching you. Your heart is pounding, you're trying to scream, and nothing comes out. This is sleep paralysis, a state where your brain wakes up before your body does. During REM sleep, your brain deliberately paralyzes your muscles, so you don't physically act out your dreams, and every night that system works exactly as intended. Sleep paralysis happens when your consciousness resurfaces while that paralysis hasn't switched off yet. The hallucinations, the shadow figure, the pressure on your chest, are thought to come from your brain still being partly in a dream state while your eyes are technically open, blending imagery with reality. What makes it different from an ordinary bad dream is that you're not asleep for this part, you're awake, aware, and completely unable to do anything about it. Cultures all over the world have their own name for the figure people report seeing. The old hag, the night hag, a demon sitting on your chest, which says less about the supernatural and more about how consistently human brains fill in the same blank. Your mind hates gaps, and in that gap, it built a monster. Exploding head syndrome. Exploding head syndrome, you're drifting off to sleep, everything is quiet, and then out of nowhere, you hear an enormous bang, a gunshot, a bomb, a door slamming, something loud enough that you sit straight up in bed, heart racing, sure that something in the house just happened. Except nothing happened. There's no bang. Nobody else heard anything. The house is exactly as quiet as it was 30 seconds ago. This is exploding head syndrome, a real, documented condition where your brain generates the perception of an incredibly loud sound that was never actually made. It tends to happen right at the edge of sleep, in that transition zone where your brain is shutting down different systems at slightly different speeds. The leading explanation is that as your brain powers down, the neurons responsible for hearing sometimes misfire all at once instead of gradually, and that sudden burst of activity gets interpreted as a massive noise. There's no actual danger and, despite the alarming name, no explosion happening anywhere near your skull. What makes it different from a normal dream sound is that this happens while you're still conscious enough to know you're awake, which is exactly why it's so jarring. Most people who experience it once assume they imagined it, or that they're losing their mind a little, and most doctors will tell you it's more common than anyone talks about. It's just rarely mentioned, because who wants to bring up the time they thought their house exploded and it turned out to be nothing at all? False awakening. False awakening. You open your eyes, you get out of bed, you go through your entire morning routine, brush your teeth, get dressed, maybe even eat breakfast, and at some point during all of that, you wake up again, this time for real, still lying in bed, and you realize none of it happened. You dreamed your own morning. This is a false awakening, a dream in which you believe you've woken up when you're actually still asleep, and it can be detailed enough to include your actual bedroom, your actual alarm clock, even the actual sounds coming from outside your window. Sometimes it happens once. Sometimes it stacks. You wake up inside the dream, only to wake up inside that waking up, layer after layer, before you finally surface into real consciousness. Researchers believe this happens because the part of your brain responsible for reality testing, deciding what's real and what isn't, is one of the last systems to fully come back online after sleep, so your dreaming mind can convincingly simulate the exact experience of being awake before your brain has actually caught up. What makes it different from an ordinary dream is that nothing about it feels dreamlike while it's happening. There's no floating, no shape-shifting, no obvious tell, just your regular life playing out with total conviction. Some people report going through this same loop several times in a single night before waking up for real, which raises a quiet, uncomfortable question. If a fake morning can feel exactly like a real one, how would you ever know, in the moment, which one you're actually in? Hypnagogic jerk. Hypnagogic jerk. You're finally drifting off. Your body is heavy. Your thoughts are getting looser and less connected. And then suddenly you feel yourself falling. Your whole body jolts, your muscles fire all at once, and you're wide awake again, heart thumping, convinced for a second that you almost fell off something. Nothing was there. You were lying flat in bed the entire time. This sudden jolt is called a hypnagogic jerk, sometimes just called a sleep start. and it's one of the most common and most misunderstood things your body does every single night. It happens during the transition from wakefulness into sleep, when your brain is essentially handing control of your body over to a different system, and for a brief moment, that handoff gets sloppy. One leading explanation is that as your muscles relax and your breathing slows, your brain briefly misreads that relaxation as a sign that you're actually falling, and it fires off a reflexive muscle contraction to catch you, the same kind of reaction you'd have if you tripped while walking. It's a leftover survival reflex, probably useful at some point for a species that used to sleep in trees, now firing off for no reason at all in a bed with a mattress and blankets. What makes it different from a nightmare is that there's no story attached, no chase, no falling dream to point to, just a sudden physical jolt with almost no memory of why. Your body reacted to a threat your mind never actually created. Catathrenia. Catathrenia, imagine your partner tells you, the next morning, that you spent half the night groaning, not snoring, not talking, a long, low moan on every exhale, on and off, for minutes at a time, like something out of a horror movie. You have no memory of it, you slept fine, you feel completely normal. This is catathrenia, a rare and fairly obscure sleep disorder where a person makes prolonged groaning sounds during sleep, almost always during REM, without ever waking up or being aware it's happening. It's different from snoring, which comes from vibration in the airway during breathing in. Catathrenia happens on the breath out, when a person takes a deep breath, holds it, and slowly releases it as a long moan, sometimes followed by a second one right after. Researchers don't have a fully settled explanation for why it happens, though it's generally understood as a breathing pattern abnormality tied to REM sleep rather than any kind of distress, despite how disturbing it can sound to whoever's in the room. What makes it different from a nightmare or sleep talking is that the person making the sound isn't reacting to anything. There's no dream content tied to it that anyone's been able to identify. It's closer to an unconscious vocal habit than an expression of anything happening in the mind. Most people who have it only find out because someone else heard it, which means there's a decent chance you've done this yourself and never once known. Lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming, you're in the middle of a dream, walking through some version of your old school or a street that doesn't exist, and something feels slightly off. And then it clicks. You realize you're dreaming, right there in the moment, while it's still happening. Suddenly you're not just experiencing the dream, you're aware you're inside one, and in some cases, you can start to steer it. This is lucid dreaming, a state where a person becomes conscious that they're dreaming while still asleep. And it's been studied seriously enough that researchers have found ways to actually confirm it's happening in real time, using pre-agreed eye movement signals that dreamers can perform once they realize they're lucid, since eye muscles are one of the few things not paralyzed during REM sleep. The leading explanation involves increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-awareness and decision-making, which is normally much quieter during regular dreaming. In a lucid dream, that region partially switches back on, so you get the vivid, uncontrolled imagery of a dream combined with the self-awareness of being awake. What makes it different from just a really vivid dream is that recognition, the specific moment of knowing, which some people can train themselves to trigger more often through certain habits and reality checks. Once you know you're dreaming, the rules stop feeling fixed, which is either the most exciting part of sleep or the closest thing to cheating your own mind has ever offered you. REM sleep behavior disorder. REM sleep behavior disorder. Most nights your body is essentially locked in place while you dream. Arms, legs, everything switched off, so you don't act out whatever's happening in your head. For some people, that lock doesn't fully engage. Someone with this condition might be lying next to their partner, dreaming about being chased, and actually start running in place, throwing punches, or shouting, all while still fully asleep. This is REM sleep behavior disorder, a condition where the normal muscle paralysis that happens during REM sleep partially fails, allowing a person to physically move out their dreams instead of staying still through them. It's understood to come from a malfunction in the brainstem circuitry responsible for that nightly shutdown, the same wiring that keeps everyone else motionless while dreaming, and it tends to show up more often in older adults. What makes it different from ordinary sleepwalking is that sleepwalking usually happens outside of REM, during deep, non-dreaming sleep, with no story attached to the movement, while this disorder is a direct physical reenactment of an actual dream, meaning the actions someone takes often line up almost exactly with what they later remember dreaming about. It's one of the few windows science has into what dreaming genuinely looks like from the outside, since normally, the only proof a dream ever happened is the memory of it. For a person with this condition, for one night at least, the dream and the body are no longer separate things. Deja rev. Deja rev. You're in a completely ordinary moment, maybe standing in a grocery store line or sitting in a meeting, and out of nowhere you get the unmistakable sense that you've dreamed this exact scene before. Not that it feels vaguely familiar, but that you specifically remember dreaming it, sometimes months earlier, sometimes so long ago you can't place when. This is déjà rêve, a French term meaning already dreamed, and it describes the specific sensation of recognizing a waking moment from a dream you had in the past, as opposed to déjà vu, which is the more general feeling that you've experienced something before without knowing why. The leading explanation isn't that you actually predicted the future, it's that your brain stores dream fragments the same way it stores real memories, loosely and without a clear tag, saying dream versus reality. So when a real moment resembles a fragment your brain filed away months ago, it gets retrieved and pattern matched, and the feeling of recognition shows up before the source does. What makes it different from ordinary déjà vu is that specificity. People who report this often insist they can recall actual details of the dream itself, not just the feeling that something is familiar. It's rare enough that most people go their whole lives without a name for it, which means somewhere out there, someone just had this exact experience today and has no idea there's a word for what happened to them. Confusional arousal. Confusional arousal, someone shakes you awake or an alarm goes off, and you sit up, eyes open, and start talking, except none of it makes sense. You might answer questions slowly, get simple facts wrong, or just stare blankly like you're processing everything through static. A few minutes later, you're completely fine, and you have almost no memory of the conversation. This is confusional arousal, sometimes called sleep drunkenness, a state where a person is woken abruptly out of deep, non-dreaming sleep and becomes only partially conscious, moving and speaking while their brain hasn't actually caught up to being awake. It happens most often when someone is pulled out of the deepest stage of sleep too quickly, before the brain has had the normal amount of time to gradually power back on. Different regions of the brain wake up on different timelines, and the parts responsible for movement and basic speech can come online well before the parts responsible for full awareness and memory, creating a person who's technically up and functioning without actually being there yet. What makes it different from just being groggy is the disconnect. Someone in this state can genuinely believe they're somewhere else, deny being asleep at all, or become oddly irritable for no clear reason, and afterward have no recollection of any of it happening. It's most common in kids and in adults who are sleep-deprived, which means the version of you running on no sleep is, more literally than you'd think, not entirely awake even when you look like you are. Somniloquy. Somniloquy, you wake up to your partner laughing, telling you that you just had an entire conversation in your sleep, full sentences, a normal tone of voice, maybe even a joke, and you have absolutely no memory of any of it. This is somniloquy, the clinical name for sleep talking, and it can range from a single mumbled word to long stretches of clear, grammatically correct speech, sometimes in a completely different tone than the person's normal voice. It can happen during any stage of sleep, though speech during deep sleep tends to be more mumbled and confused, while speech during lighter stages or REM tends to be clearer, occasionally lining up with whatever the person is dreaming about at the time. Researchers still don't have a single settled explanation for why it happens, but the general understanding is that the brain regions responsible for language production can occasionally activate independently of full consciousness, essentially letting speech slip out without the awareness that normally goes with it. Night terrors. Night terrors. A child, or sometimes an adult, sits bolt upright a couple hours after falling asleep, eyes wide open, screaming, heart racing, and completely inconsolable, and yet the next morning they remember absolutely nothing. No monster, no chase, no story at all. This is a night terror, clinically called pavor nocturnus, and it's often confused with a nightmare, but the two are almost entirely different experiences, happening in different parts of sleep. A nightmare happens during REM sleep, comes with a vivid story the person can usually recall in detail, and the person is genuinely dreaming when it occurs. A night terror happens during deep, non-dreaming sleep, usually in the first third of the night, and involves no dream content at all, just an abrupt surge of fear and physical arousal without a narrative attached to it. The leading explanation is that a night terror is essentially the body's fear response getting triggered directly, without the brain first constructing a dream to justify it, a kind of short circuit between deep sleep and the nervous system's alarm response. What makes it different from a bad dream is that a person in a night terror often can't be woken or comforted in the moment, and won't remember any of it afterward, while someone who had a nightmare wakes up scared but with a clear memory of exactly what scared them. Whatever caused all that screaming, in the end, the person experiencing it never actually saw.